Jive microphone. Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, we have Council Member Rennie. We have KCAT ready for Zoom. Thank you. So I'm going to call the special meeting of February 15th to order. Clerk, if you could please play our rules of civility and decorum, and then we'll take roll call. Thank you.
The public is welcome to participate at town council meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meetings is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. At each meeting, the following expectations of civil conduct shall apply. 1. For the benefit of the entire community, the town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the council agenda. 2. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at council meetings. 3. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at town council meetings. 4. All public comments at the town council meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. 5. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the mayor may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the council exiting the chamber. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the council would return to the chamber and the mayor would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a council meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code Section 403. These expectations of conduct also apply to meetings of all town boards, committees, and commissions.
Thank you. I will now ask the clerk to take attendance.
Councilmember Rennie?
Here.
Councilmember Moore?
Here.
Councilmember Hudis?
Here.
Vice Mayor Badami?
Here.
Mayor Risto?
Here. Okay, before we get underway, I'm going to ask Councilmember Moore to make his statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to let my council colleagues and the public know that I will be recusing myself from this item due to my relationship with the commissioner, and I hope that you all have a productive discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, as we start, I just want to remind everybody that this is a special meeting, and so there's only one topic on the agenda. And in fact, it's a pretty unusual meeting. So I just want to explain that the comments will be limited to the agenda item, and our format will be the staff report, then council preliminary questions, then public comment, and then council discussion and action. And this is not a hearing. This is essentially to hear a recommendation that was made by a committee, and the only question is the recommendation to be accepted by the council or not? So the comments will be limited to that. I also want to remind people, because we do have quite a few people, and we did have, I think, a small amount of issue at the last meeting, there will be absolutely no clapping, no booing, no comments at all. Just, conduct yourselves as quietly as you are right now, and each person will get the opportunity to speak. Okay, thank you. So with that, I will go to the staff report.
Good evening, Gabrielle Whelan, Town Attorney. So what happened is the town received a number of complaints regarding a letter that was sent by a planning commissioner to the State Department of Housing and Community Development regarding the town's housing element. And the town has a code of conduct policy for the town council. We used the town council's code of conduct as a model for how to handle the complaints that came in regarding the planning commissioner. The code of conduct provides that complaints go to an evaluation committee for review and a recommended course of action. If this were a town council complaint, the evaluation committee would consist of either the mayor or vice mayor and the town manager and town attorney. In this instance, the town received a number of complaints that because the mayor appointed the commissioner, it was inappropriate for the mayor to participate on the evaluation committee. For that reason, the evaluation committee was expanded to consist of the mayor, vice mayor, town manager, and town attorney. The evaluation committee reviewed all of the complaints that were submitted to the town. The complaints fell into, generally speaking, 3 buckets. The first bucket was that the commissioner had a conflict of interest in writing the letter to HCD. The second bucket was that there had been a violation of procedural due process in that the commissioner had expressed an opinion on the housing element outside of the legislative process. And the third bucket was that the letter violated the code of conduct in that the comments in the letter were divisive. So I'll take those in turn. The conflict of interest laws center around sources of income to public officials, and there's no implication of a source of income to this commissioner, so the conflict of interest concerns are not relevant in this case. And then next I'll address procedural due process. So procedural due process prohibits public officials from giving an opinion on an adjudicatory matter that's going to come before them where they need to make findings. It does not come into play for legislative decisions, and the town's housing element is a legislative decision because it's a form of legislation that will govern housing in the town. And so to that end, a commissioner is free to express an opinion in advance of a hearing on a legislative matter. So there was no violation of procedural due process. The town's code of conduct does require that public officials engage in constructive communication. And the evaluation committee felt that some of the terminology used in the letter to HCD was divisive rather than constructive. And on that basis, the evaluation committee recommended counseling for the commissioner and also that the commissioner be censured by the town council. Censure is a formal statement of disapproval of a specific activity. And the proposed statement is that the town council finds that the planning commissioner violated the town's code of conduct requirement for constructive communications when she described the referendum proponents by race and socioeconomic status and wishes to adopt a formal statement of disapproval. That concludes the staff report, and I'm available if the council has questions.
Thank you very much. So right now I'll see if council members have questions to direct to staff, preliminary questions before we hear from the public. Vice Mayor Badami.
Thank you. A question for Ms. Whelan. We received correspondence late this afternoon from Ms. Clark that she's being treated unfairly and that the code of conduct is being violated by the town. There's an allegation that we are not following procedures. So my questions to you are we following proper procedure? And is the town violating its own code of conduct?
So we used the town council code of conduct as a model, And the town council code of conduct provides that for major violations, the town is to hire special counsel to interview the public official against whom the allegations are being made. In this instance, the letter that was written to HCD really spoke for itself, and there didn't appear to be a need to hire special counsel to interview anybody. And so on that basis, I did not recommend that the town hire special counsel. And I believe that that's within the procedure because we were using it as a model only. And so on that basis, I don't believe there's a violation of the town's code of conduct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. I guess with regard to that same desk item that came in this afternoon, I honestly did not have a chance to read it until just now. And as with other desk items, I believe that we are required to consider everything that comes in testimony, including what comes in during the hearing itself. But consistent with my understanding from previous hearings, is it acceptable that we put a weight on what we consider based on how well we can understand it, and how much, and therefore related to how much time we have to read and comprehend and research and think about things? So my question is it reasonable for us to consider the desk item with the weight of the time that we had to consider it?
My recommendation would be that the council take a break if there's an interest in reading anything that was submitted this afternoon, because we should consider all the information that came to the council.
Okay, thank you. I would not be making that request at this time. I'm interested in the public.
Okay. Any other comments? I want to make one comment, and that is that this process unfolded in kind of in starts and steps. I don't think in the history of the time I've been watching the council meetings or the planning commission, anything that's been done by planning commissioner and before has been considered major, and so typically it's resulted in coaching from the mayor. In this case, we did receive complaints from the community. We take them seriously, regardless of the fact of whether I voted or not for a commissioner. All of our commissioners are all of our commissioners. And so, it's a matter of just being fair. So we did work our way through this process, and I think one of the things when we're done is I would like the policy committee to take a look at clarifying our policies around receiving complaints and discipline and see where we kind of had to struggle and work to put this together. So that would be one recommendation I'll be making going forward. So with that, I will open the public comment, reminding people that the only item up for discussion is whether the council should accept censure or not. And that's the only topic for our discussion tonight. Thank you. Councilmember Badami, or Vice Mayor.
I want to make sure that I understand that. So I believe that we can also take other action, which could mean maybe another type of disciplinary action. So it's not just a matter of whether we want to accept or not accept the censure, but we can take other action that could be removal of the planning commissioner from the planning commission. Is that correct?
There is a separate resolution that provides that a 3/5 vote of the council can choose to remove a commissioner, and the agenda description is broad enough to encompass other actions.
Okay, so we don't have 5 members of the council, so does it just mean a majority, or does it mean 3/5 of the council?
It means 3.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, and maybe I misspoke, but we're basically talking about whether or what the discipline will be based on the committee's unanimous recommendation. Okay, so I will open it to public comment. I see a number of people on Zoom, none of whom have their hands raised. So I will look over there again in a few minutes. But going to my cards, our first speaker, and you have 3 minutes, remember to address it to us, is Paris Sibley.
I'm a long-term resident, generational from town, born and raised, family, grandparents, the whole gamut. Business owner and multicultural. I'm a daughter of American Revolution on one side, and I'm Hispanic on the other side. I am so grossly offended, horrifically offended, not only for my children, but for my friends and my family, by that letter that was written. Anybody that represents this town, whether implied or unimplied, has a responsibility to behave in that manner. It is not just that she wrote the letter. It is my understanding that other things are occurring as well that I think are very offensive, including personal favors, making comments about people's house plans that are submitted, including their kitchen, which is not part of what their role is. And I know that because I've built homes in this town before, several of them. She needs to be removed. It's an example. Everybody's role that represents this town affects every single person here, whether you're a child and a school member, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a senior citizen, whoever you are. If you represent this town and you sit on this board or you work for any other office, whether it's paid or unpaid, it is your responsibility to conduct yourself no different than those rules that you put up there. White racist, the town, most of the town,
Please address the council. Thank you.
most of the town is multicultural, and when you call them racist, the person making that comment is racist. And I am so horrifically offended. I am upset. I've been so upset for days. People are not coming to this meeting and speaking up because they're afraid that the stuff that they have before the commission is going to get turned down, and they want to wait to say something until after they see what happens because of the ramifications. And there's several. There's doctors that have plans before this ruling. There are lawyers, people that are building houses that are afraid to come up and speak about how they feel. And they're not white, and they're not male, but they don't want to do it because they feel like they're going to get backlash. And that's a precedent that you're setting by allowing this to continue. And if you don't remove her, you're allowing it to be acceptable. It's not somehow it's unfair to her. I didn't hear an apology from her to everyone else. And her writing a letter to the state, apologizing to the state, is not who she should be apologizing to. It's every citizen in this town when she just put a black mark on it. We're not racist. And it's horrific for you guys to allow her to continue and not set an example by removing her.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Wiley. I have a card from, I don't see Miss Wiley.
No, she's on vacation.
Okay, well, our policy is that she
has to be present because
on Zoom, I'm sorry.
but you changed the rules tonight and you put it on
we
Zoom
have not
and
changed
you're not
any,
streaming it.
She can't talk on streaming. She can only talk on Zoom. So we have complete access. Okay, I will look on Zoom and see if she's there. Thank you.
Okay.
Please silence your phone. Thank you. My next speaker is Richard Cananan, I'm sorry. I won't blame your handwriting. I'll blame my eyes.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. As a 40-year-plus resident of Los Gatos, I'd like to know how many of those who are sitting in judgment of this issue tonight would have co-signed that letter in question that was sent to the California Housing Elements Board. The reason why it's important to me is, as one of the 3,400 plus who signed the legal referendum, I'd like to know if we have anyone representing our point of view among the elected or appointed town officials. Do you agree with the racist gender bias that was reflected in the letter? I love living in Los Gatos, and I want to do what I can to support the community. I do not believe that this letter was in the best interest of our town. Since the State Housing Elements Board sits in judgment of the town of Los Gatos, it makes me wonder if they actually believe the tone of the letter and if they may have retaliated against us as a town as a result of that letter. It's my understanding that they sent us about 11 pages of additional questions which will require the town staff time and effort to respond to. If any of those questions were in response to the misleading statements made in that letter, then the town will have to bear those additional costs. In summary, if you had done your job, we would never have needed to hold this meeting right now. I do not have any ill will against the author of the letter. I expect that she will have a great career as an activist, but I do not think that she is well suited to work on the Los Gatos Planning Commission. If any of you have a vote in this matter, do not agree with my last statement, then you've essentially answered my first question and condoned that the behavior. I do not accept censure. I ask for removal. We are all residents, and we are all the same race, the human race. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jack Veneta.
Good evening, Mayor Ristow, Vice Mayor Badami, Council, and staff. It's unfortunate that we are here tonight to discuss the Code of Conduct and a rule violation by Planning Commissioner Kylie Clark, an individual who espouses racial equality, equity, inclusion, and justice. Prejudice is prejudice and should never be dismissed, especially when one sits in a quasi-legislative commission as important as the Planning Commission. Bias and prejudice against any socioeconomic group is inconsistent with the values of this town. Here is the bright line test that each council member must ask themselves. How will anyone who is of this different socioeconomic group from Commissioner Clark ever truly know they receive fair and balanced decision from her? They now know that she has taken a very public position regarding a certain socioeconomic group that apparently she disdains. They won't, and that is not to be tolerated. What Ms. Clark did was calculated and written with a goal in mind. It simply cannot be viewed as a mistake. She cited her position as a planning commissioner to attempt to bring weight to her letter and influence the California HCD against the referendum. The facts she uses are grossly misstated. Setting aside the intolerant and disgusting characterization of those favoring the referendum, it was not a, quote, few rich, white, anti-housing men, end quote, that passed the referendum, but rather it was 3,000 plus residents of various backgrounds and diversity who signed the referendum in 3 weeks, thus qualifying the referendum for a public vote. The referendum at its core is about who gets to decide the future of the town. The reality is that Mrs. Clark does not agree with the referendum process and does not want the residents to decide for themselves. This is why she knowingly wrote and asked for HCD, quote, to support our town, end quote. This was not a mistake, but a well-thought-through action taken by Commissioner Clark. Prior to this incident, I was eagerly awaiting to see how these new commission members would perform. However, Commissioner Clark should end this now. She should do the honorable thing and resign rather than put this kind of stress on her cohorts, her friends, her family, and the community. The town council is responsible for appointing and ensuring balanced and fair individuals serve on this important commission. If Mrs. Clark refuses to resign, then the council should remove her. No individual's interests should outweigh what is the best interest of the town, and the right of residents to have fair and balanced individuals serving on this commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Please no applause. Vice Mayor Badami.
Thank you. Mr. Von Natta, thank you for your comments. The letter from Ms. Ms. Kylie Clark has been circulated for about 3 months. It was part of the HCD packet that the town submitted. So with that in mind, that it's been public for about 3 months now, have the authors of the referendum that were targeted receive an apology from Ms. Clark to date?
None whatsoever.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Jason Farwell.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Jason Farwell, longtime resident, born and raised. I'm a 5th generation. My great-great-grandfather was John Linden, who founded this town. And we've been here a long time. I can tell you I've come to a lot of these meetings over the years for lots of different reasons. And this is the first time I've actually shown up with my blood pressure raised a bit. What Ms. Clark has done is essentially just thrown fuel on the fire. And she did it intentionally. She did it intentionally. And I don't know what her background is. I don't know Ms. Clark. If I happen to meet her, I welcome a conversation with her. But her actions are intentional. And she actually reaffirms what she says in her letter that she issued to you today. And I'll tell you exactly what she says. She says, I made a mistake and I wish I had worded things differently. But I had the best interests of the town at heart. And the email was truthful. 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 Really. Was that a truthful email that she put out to the state? That's for you to decide. Ultimately, you control her future. Her comments about the housing element, no one here in Los Gatos is anti-housing. I'm anti-density, that's for sure. I don't want 3,000 new units. Apparently she wants 12,000. It's ridiculous. She's irresponsible, she's immature, she doesn't belong on the planning commission, she should be removed. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to look at Councilmember Rennie. Our next speaker is Jim Zanardi.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Jim Zanardi. I was born and raised here. I've been here for my whole life, 73 years. I guess I'm one of those rich white men that she's speaking about. And I made my money by going into your backyards 40 years ago, picking up your garbage and taking it out on my back. And when she says that, she offends me. And she needs to be removed, not censored. If that word was replaced, white man was replaced with black man or brown man or yellow man or any other man, if I wrote that letter, I'd be run out of town because I'd be a racist. What makes her any different? She's a racist. And I don't think she needs to be censored. She needs to be gone. And maybe the rich men in this town, the rich white men, need to look at the council who appointed her. And maybe next time when it's time for re-election, maybe the rich white men ought to get together and maybe get some people in here that would pick somebody that has a little bit of experience. I think she's in her early 20s, correct me if I'm wrong. What experience does she have to be on the planning commission? Come on. She's going to stand in front of developers and people who are trying to start businesses that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who've had years and years of experience, and she's going to judge them and make decisions for them? I don't think so. That's totally wrong. So maybe the white men ought to get together and decide, shame on you people if you keep her in here. Maybe we need to replace you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ron Meyer.
Likewise, I'm a longtime resident of Los Gatos. I've been here since 1988. I live in the Bellwood area. Consequently, when I saw this letter, smoke came out of my ears. In addition, obviously, Ms. Clark doesn't understand that we're a democratic republic and the referendum process is part of the state constitution. And so consequently, the ability of the citizens to decide what is best for them is part and parcel of the referendum. So either she doesn't know the state constitution, she doesn't know about democracy in a democratic republic, but the whole idea is she's implying that we have no choice in the matter. In fact, the last two paragraphs pretty much explain her attitude that because of the referendum, the state is now on notice that we've got a problem. Because of the referendum, it's a legal process. We have a right to petition as part of the referendum. And the fact that she thinks she knows better than the people of Los Gatos, who the heck does she think she is? It's offensive. In addition, I guess I'm one of those rich white guys too, okay? I want her removed. And if she is not removed, next election, we'll vote to remove those representatives who will not honor the will of the people of Los Gatos.
Our next speaker is Donna McCurry.
Good evening, Council. Donna McCurry, and I'm speaking as a resident of Los Gatos, not in my position as a chamber staff member. I'm going to just take a little different approach here and just bear with me. At 22 years of age, my first job out of college, I was an assistant buyer for a major Philadelphia-based department store that had 15 stores in the tri-state area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. One of the first, and I'm putting this in quotes.
You may as well hold it. Hold on, I think we have another microphone.
Testing, testing.
This is problematic when people change heights.
Okay, one of the first, and I'm putting it in quotes, emails I sent was not well received by the 17 department managers or the 17 vice presidents for each store. What I perceived as humor and light sarcasm was seen as a negative and condescending tone. Luckily, I wasn't fired. My divisional merchandise manager worked with me and mentored me on proper communication, chain of command, and people skills. At 59 years of age, I still carry those lessons with me today. That said, we can misspeak or use the wrong phrasing when we are passionate about something at any age. For example, a situation arose with a community group at a promenade this summer. Our executive director was away on vacation just that week. The staff made a decision to remedy the situation based on chamber protocols and guidelines. The group did not agree with our decision. A meeting was called with the executive director to discuss the issue. During the conversation, a comment by one of the members of the group, who is my age, directed to Catherine about the staff, "You shouldn't leave decisions to the lowest common denominator when you are away." As a staff member, I took this very personally. But the individual and I had a productive conversation about the comment and the situation, agreed to move past it and move forward. We just talked and recognized how to move forward. My point is, we all make mistakes, and this should be used as a mentoring and teachable moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Badami.
Thank you, Ms. McCurry. Are you referring that planning commissioners are kind of a training ground then?
I don't think they're a training ground, but I think, as I said, everyone when you're passionate about something, no matter what age, you make mistakes. And you still need mentoring at every age. And I just think we all make mistakes. We've all said things we wish we could take back or had used different phrasing. So I think we all take these commissions very seriously. I think Commissioner Clark or anyone who signs up for these understands the responsibilities that come with it. But when you, like I said, we're all just, you don't come into a job 100% knowing how to do it.
Okay, I think you answered my question, but I did have one more.
Okay.
So in referencing your first job, was that in the private or the public sector?
It was in the private sector.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see. I'll do one more in the room and then I'll go to Zoom. Corey Walbach.
Good evening. My name is Corey Wolbach. I'm here representing SV at Home, Silicon Valley at Home. I'll start with a personal note, though, that I've served on a city council in an affluent, high expectations community in Silicon Valley where housing issues and concerns about behavior of commissioners have been very complex and contentious issues in a past life of mine. So I don't envy the difficult conversation that you're having tonight, and I understand where everybody's coming from. I'm here on behalf of SV at Home to advocate and to ask against censure for Commissioner Clark for a few reasons. The issue of process has been raised, and I do hope you review very carefully the city's process. I've read the process, and it does look to me like that process may not have been followed here, but I'm not an attorney. I just encourage taking a second look at the process to make sure that everything's being done by the book, because that's the whole point of the conversation today, to make sure that the city and every part of the city is abiding by the rules and to make sure that that's upheld. So I do encourage taking the time to do that. The primary question before you tonight is, was the communication constructive? And if the wording was divisive to a degree requiring action, requiring reprimand, what would the appropriate action be? Is it counseling? Is it private admonishment? Is it some sort of a public admonishment, which I think that this session is already provided? Or does it rise to the level of censorship, censure or removal? You have a lot of options. But that's just if you think the way it was phrased was inappropriate. As far as the core content and the objectives, which in our reading were offered in good faith by the commissioner, please remember that the state of California, specifically HCD, has a obligation to review and to understand the context and the dynamics in Los Gatos while reviewing Los Gatos's housing element. The state of California's own guidance points out and warns cities, including yourself, that the reality is that wealthier, wider residents tend to dominate conversations and policymaking around housing. And recognizing and merely pointing out the historic and extant realities of racialized and class privilege and power and how those impact the segregation that we do see in Silicon Valley is not itself racist. It is not racist to point out structural racism. And pointing out structural racism in no way accuses an individual of personal bias. The question is, was this offered in good faith? Was it productive? At SV at Home, we think that this letter was an important part of the conversation, but certainly not the end of the conversation. And so we hope you do not censure, but consider your other options. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. I'll go to Zoom, and on Zoom we have, I'm sorry. If you'd like to remain in the room, you can be quiet. Thank you. Is there a problem in the back row?
They keep violating the policies
Yeah.
set forth for the meeting. There's applause, there's booing, and so I'm curious to know, is there procedure here or not?
Okay, that's the last warning. The next outburst will result in asking you to leave. Thank you. Would you like to leave the room, please? Our speaker on Zoom will be Susan Amadian, I'm sorry. You should be able to speak. Okay, I see her. Her hand is down. Susan, okay, your hand is up again. You should be able to unmute yourself and speak, please. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening, but I'll go back to the room. And Susan, if you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand again, and I'll try to get back to you. I see Lee Quintana. His hand is raised. So you should be able to unmute yourself, Ms. Quintana, and begin speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to start by saying that I thoroughly agree with the previous speaker from Silicon Valley Home, and I'm not going to repeat anything that he said. I would like to comment that a lot has been made of the fact that Kaylee Clark identified herself as a planning commissioner and then proceeded to write her letter as an individual resident. This is common procedure when somebody in any committee approaches the planning commission or the town council. They identify themselves first as being a member of a committee or commission, and then saying they're speaking for themselves, not for that body. So I think that's shouldn't even be considered in your deliberations. Secondly, in my opinion, reading the letter, she identified which I think was a mistake, just because of the controversy it's engendered, rich white men. She was referring not to the 3,000 that signed the petition. She was referring to those who sponsored and paid for the referendum petition. Thirdly, for myself, and I should say that I was a past member of the Housing Element Advisory Committee, as well as a past member of the Planning Commission. For myself, when I read her letter, while I acknowledge that it might have been better not to use that phrase, I was glad to see that letter because she expressed some of the concerns that I have, which is that the referendum is the elephant in the room and we are not addressing it. It's not mentioned in anything that has been published in the information that's going to have or discussed as to what the implications will be once we get an approved housing element and whether that will still be subject to the referendum and what the consequences of that are. I think that's an important issue that is not being discussed. And let's see if I covered all my points. So in that sense, I think she was addressing the best interests of the town. The other thing is that I can't find the desk items, and I had written an email to a town attorney addressing that specific question about whether they had followed the procedure or whether I understood the procedure in the code of conduct. Because
thank you, Ms. Quintana.
Nothing in the staff report that identifies
Ms. Quintana,
this as
your
a
time
major.
is up. I'm sorry, your time is up. Do we have any? We have a question for you from Council Member Hudes.
Ms. Quintana, I wonder if you could finish your sentence about the inquiry that you made and what the response was.
Okay. I have been struggling with this whole thing in trying to decide what I was going to say and write about. And I finally realized that I was having trouble because from the staff report, I couldn't figure out whether this was a minor infraction or a major infraction. And going to the policy, there was specific steps to be taken. And they didn't seem to be followed. Now, I will say that I have not gotten a response to that email, and I don't know whether the comments that were made in the beginning of the meeting were in reference to my email, but I still have questions about that. I do not believe that this,
Thank you. I think I
she's
got
been a
you.
responsible planning commissioner,
Okay.
except for this mistake.
Okay, thank
you. I got the answer to my question.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to point out that I think our staff is taking down some of the questions, so we'll address everything at the end. You know, if questions come up, we'll be addressing that at the very end of the public comment. I see a hand raised on Zoom for a member of public. So member of public, you may unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, in trying to understand the situation, I did some research, and here are several of my findings. First, the report provided references policy 2-04, but there are other relevant policies, in particular 2-05 and 2-11. According to 2-05, under legal and ethical standards, quote, planning commissioners serve as a model of leadership and civility to the community and treat all members of the public, each other, and the issues before them with respect to ensure open and effective government. Planning commissioners are actually held to a higher ethical standard than council members. According to 2-11, planning commissioners are also required to complete AB 1234 ethics training every 2 years, which I believe is quite rigorous to ensure that the public is treated fairly. Failure to comply with all town policies, guidelines, and handbooks is, quote, grounds for dismissal, according to policy 2-11. Policy 2-05 says planning commissioners serve at the, quote, pleasure of the council, meaning that the council is responsible for selecting and removing commissioners. I do not find references to censure in 2-05 or 2-11. So I believe this is really not about the housing element, but about the public feeling that it can get a fair, unbiased hearing in the future. I advise removal. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Badami.
I didn't catch the speaker's name.
He chose not to give it.
I didn't give it.
Okay, thank you.
And we don't require that. We ask it, but we do not require it. Okay, I don't see any other hands on Zoom, so I'll go back to the room. James Dunlap. Or is it Dunlay? I'm sorry. Sorry.
And I wish I were taller. Okay, let's see what we can do.
You can hold it if you, okay.
No, that's fine. Well, I'm not quite as long a term resident. I actually feel like a newbie. I've only lived here for 27 years. And in those 27 years, I've had business in front of the Planning Commission. I've been to council meetings. I have tried rather sporadically to be part of this process. One of the things I always walk away with is the notion that the people I talk to listen, the people I talk to weigh the options on the table, and the people I talk to reach the conclusions they reach with goodwill and good faith. We don't always like the answer, but ultimately, if we don't have the opinion that there is goodwill and good faith, we don't have government we can trust. So in this process, as I said, I've had business in front of the commission before. I'm likely to have business in front of the Planning Commission again. I'm not sure today that I will get a fair hearing. Why? Because I'm a rich white guy. And I do not support high-density housing in all neighborhoods as they are being proposed. That's just my opinion. But I wouldn't dare call someone names because they disagreed with me. I believe that transparency is the best policy. Transparency not just in what we do, but how we think. Who are we? How do we look at our fellow man? How do we look at issues in front of the table? What's on the table today is actually a question of what to do about a transparent event. What's the transparent event? Someone raised their opinion about members of our community because they disagreed with them. They used in what I would view as racial slurs. Now, being called white is not a racial slur unless you mean it with an evil heart, and it sure sounded like that's what came across in the letter. Rich is not really a slur unless you mean it as a derogatory because you can afford to do something that someone else can't. Well, they're talking about us. I just came back from Georgia. I went to go visit a poor community, actually one of the poorest in Georgia. It's actually a community of deep color. And in that community, I would look around, I looked at that town, I looked at their situation, I looked at who these people are. They actually have one of the highest crime rates in the state of Georgia. And I look around in this room, I look around in our town, and I gotta tell you, you're all rich by a lot. And most of us are white or partly white. And many of us, maybe most, do not wish the state to impose high-density housing requirements on our community. But yet, we rely on you to carry that message forward. A planning commissioner
Thank you. You may finish your last sentence.
A planning commissioner with that level of bias in the community must be removed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ellie Hudson.
Good evening. My name's Ellie, and I also just want to preface that I have also worked in Northern California City Councils working for mayors, or a mayor, but I will not list which. And I first want to make my position on this decision being made today clear. I know Kylie Clark personally, but I have witnessed both her personal and professional interactions. Consistently, Kylie has shown herself to be an individual of true integrity with dedication to her community unlike anyone I have ever met. She also maintains immense patience, compassion, and civility with every person she encounters. Despite what disagreements some of you may have with her, I'm positive that she would be willing to have, and in fact actively welcome, an open and respectful conversation with any one of you because she sees you first as community members. For this reason, I firmly believe any censuring of Kylie Clark on this matter would not only be wholly unnecessary, but would also reflect poorly on this town and its values, as Kylie embodies everything a stand-up community member should be. Now, in regards to Kylie's letter to HCD, I actually also appreciate Kylie's transparency and forwardness in acknowledging her position on the Planning Commission in her letter, despite sending it in a private citizen capacity. This is how representatives should act when they are exercising their First Amendment right to freedom of speech, with full honesty and accountability as she did. Further, I've read through all of the complaints listed in tonight's agenda, and it's one thing to disagree with Kylie's positions, which is totally appropriate, but it is another to blatantly misunderstand her and then mischaracterize her in a way that is also damaging to the community, which is where my concern largely lies. While I respect the fact that enough Los Gatos residents signed this referendum to make it onto the ballot, it needs to be recognized that not only was financial compensation utilized to make this happen, which is only possible to do when one is, quote, rich, but just over 3,000 residents out of over 32,000 is not even 10% and sounds like rule by the few to me. By my reading and analysis, there was no opinion or attack expressed in Kylie's letter about, by my reading and analysis, there was no opinion or attack expressed in Kylie's letter about the referendum organizers, just simple objective facts. She says nothing about the signers or citizens in her letter, simply the organizers who are in fact white and do and do, in fact, have financial means, which both influence their political opinions on this housing matter as they do for all of us. I want to make that clear, and the claim that Kylie Clark used racist or divisive language is simply untrue. Again, for this reason, any counseling or censuring for Kylie Clark on the basis of communication would be unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you. I have somebody on Zoom. I've got 3 cards left. I'm sure it's really funny in the back row. It's been really disrespectful. I'm not seeing a lot of disrespect when people speak on one side and then on another it's hysterical. So I'm going to ask you to walk out into the hallway. I'm doing nothing. I'm not interrupting the room. Councilmember Hudes.
Could we have a recess, please? I'd also like to read the letter for 10 minutes.
Okay. So aside from the fact that our disruptor has left the room, we have a council member who's asking for a recess so we can review. Would you like to listen to the rest of the public comment and take a break, or?
If there's no more disruption, if there is, then I would like to have a recess at that time, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So if everyone else in here can comport themselves quietly, I'd appreciate that. Mutual respect. Thank you. I will go with a card from Alan Gustavo Faz Ochoa. Please correct me.
Ochoa.
Ochoa.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and the Town Council. My name is Alan Foss, short, easier for all of you. And I'm here to urge the Town Council to reject the recommendation to censure the Planning Commissioner regarding the language that made some people uncomfortable. As a recent member of this community, I have been in shock as to how far behind the town is in reaching and understanding marginalized communities. This town council has made a commitment to create a more diverse and inclusive Los Gatos, and censuring someone who's speaking on behalf of the unhoused and other marginalized groups is simply not the way to go. I am particularly concerned that this town is even considering censuring someone who's striving to represent those of us who simply do not have a voice in this body. As a Latino man, attending these meetings in person is particularly challenging. Making sure I walk in slowly so that no one sees me as a threat, or making sure I don't put my hands in my pocket so as to not trigger the law enforcement present. So it's definitely exhausting. It's something that bothers me every time I have to come in here. And part of accomplishing inclusivity is acknowledging one's privilege. And this is a town dominated by affluent white people. These are facts. Let's not sit on our privilege. I want to be a part of this community. I want to feel safe, and I want my opinion to matter, not just to those who have lived here for many decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a hand raised for Alex Schur on Zoom. Alex, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, Mayor and council members. Thanks for your time tonight. My name is Alex Shore. I'm speaking tonight in my personal capacity. My personal capacity is someone whose very earliest memories in life were the house I grew up in on Garden Hill Drive until I was about 4 or 5. Someone whose little brother went to Los Gatos High School, someone who worked in Los Gatos and has been in this valley, including my family, for multiple generations. I grew up, and some of you probably know me, some of you don't. So I'll say that I am a white man. I am 41 years old. I grew up in a place of privilege in this valley, and I work for an organization that works on civic engagement and community engagement. And we know, because research shows it, research from UCLA professors, research from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, that the public process around development and housing is in fact dominated by folks who are disproportionately white, wealthier, single-family homeowners, and older. And that's very important that we keep that in mind, because it has created the current housing crisis in which we all are experiencing. Whether you're a grandson or a grandmother, you or your family or someone you love and care about is in danger of being displaced from this community because of this housing crisis. And the more wealthy or segregated or disparate we become as a community, the more divided we will be. It is only when we have people of different incomes and different backgrounds that we can be truly the America that I believe in. And I think it's just really important to keep these things in mind when we're talking about the language. Would it have been something I would have written as someone who's a city commissioner? Probably not. And if your goal is to have Ms. Clark, quote, learn her lesson, then I think the stress and anguish that she's been through today and in the days preceding this has probably accomplished that goal. But I think it is very important for members of our community to be able to speak truth to power about issues and be able to bring up the injustices and the inequities that have existed in our community and caused many of the challenges that we're currently facing. Thanks very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Let me see. I have another hand, Matthew Reed on Zoom. You should be able to unmute. Here you go.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Council. Appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you. Matthew Reed, I'm the Director of Policy at Silicon Valley at Home. I wanted to speak technically to the housing element process, which I think is underlying the question before you, and the question of whether or not the comments that were made in the letter to HCD were relevant, appropriate, or constructive. Under state law, AB 686, affirmatively furthering fair housing, requires jurisdictions to assess the barriers to public participation posed by race and income, housing tenure, family status, et cetera. This requires explicitly identifying local practices, both governmental and non-governmental, that pose a barrier to equal access to planning decisions and subsequently access to housing opportunities. A ballot measure that would constrain city planning in a way that would impose policies to constrain inclusive planning is highly relevant to this process. Its inclusion in HCD assessment is constructive and may preempt lengthy, costly periods of non-compliance. All of Los Gatos has been identified in explicit racial and economic terms as a racially concentrated area of affluence by the state, pursuant to AB 686 and AB 1304. This measure is part of a required analysis for the housing element that identifies areas that are wealthy and predominantly white. This required analysis must include a regional context. Does Los Gatos have more areas that are predominantly white and wealthy compared to other Bay Area cities? Why is this, and how do we integrate these exclusive communities? Based on this analysis, cities like Los Gatos are required to take affirmative steps to expand opportunities for protected classes, which would otherwise have limited access to housing they can afford. RHNA obligations are to have sites zoned at 30 units or more per acre for lower income housing that would realistically be expected to redevelop in 8 years. The ballot measure complicates, at the very least, the ability for the city to comply with the state housing element law, which requires conscious steps to address socioeconomic and racial disparities in access to both public participation and housing opportunities. As such, the comments shared with HCD were not only relevant to the housing element process, but could be seen as a constructive step taken by a local citizen to engage in this process. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any council members with their hands up. I had someone on Zoom whose hand has been going up and down. Chris of Los Gatos. I'm going to close the Zoom in a minute, so if you'd like to speak, okay, your hand is back up. Okay, Chris of, nope, it's down. Chris of Los Gatos, if you'd like to speak, unmute yourself, please.
Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Woo. This is not easy for me to speak because I was hoping this would not come to this point. We spent a lot of time, energy, and money on this with using our staff, and we just don't have a lot of money to do this. I'm a longtime resident here since 1974. I came here with absolutely nothing but a VW van and a dresser and some clothes. I worked my way to the top, and believe me, I still don't think I'm at the top. There are times I think I'm barely making ends meet. I have in the past been a commissioner myself. I've partaken in the town's activities, both on the government side and the private side. I've been an active member to all sides. I find that Ms. Clark expressed an opinion without thinking of the consequences. And a lot of people tonight spoke expressing that. So it's no use for me to go in circles and repeat this again. The one thing she has done is represent our town in a manner to say she's representing herself in this letter, but she's using the fact that she has this tool of being a commissioner to make her even more powerful. There's an old saying that the pen is mightier than the sword. She considers herself a professional writer. You've seen her articles in Mercury News and other publications. You've seen her write for other people, etc. And this pen has power to achieve more than what a sword does. When she decided to use that pen, I wonder if she realized the consequences. And yes, she keeps saying, or people keep saying, that she is young and made a mistake. At this time in history at Los Gatos, that is going through a possible deficit and fighting the state, etc. This is not a training ground for something like this. And I feel truly that this is not the end of this subject with this young lady. And that I feel that she should be removed. She could do so much for other community activities. She now could dedicate that time to it. I know she works with the homeless. I congratulate her for that. She works with other things in the community, and she belongs to a nonprofit. I just feel at this time she should be removed for what she has done and learn a lesson. Whether it's young or old, if you don't have the experience, I understand. But to use your position with a government entity is not a good thing for us. The town doesn't need that kind of attention. Thank you all who have spoken, good, bad, or indifferent. Thank you.
Thank you. That is our last speaker on Zoom. I'm looking at a number of people here. If anybody else on Zoom wants to speak, I'd like to see a hand come up. Okay, I'm going to turn my attention to the last couple cards. Anybody who's going to speak has brought their card up. So, and then after that, we'll take a break to go through the desk item. Okay, my next speaker is Carrie Dunlay.
Thank you. I've never spoken in front of this group before, but I just want to say I was on that same trip to Georgia, and it was a town of a lot of poor people, high crime rate, and I prayed for all those people there. And I want to tell you, the young man that we met with, he told us, and he's a black young man, and he's trying to save these black children from being shot and turned into drug addicts and what have you. He doesn't want them to be statistics. And he told us, for the people in the room who are saying they're afraid to be in this room with white people, that he gets more support from people that look like us than he does from people that look like him, just for the record. And I also want to mention to the person, I don't really know all the background, but we're all citizens here, regardless of our skin color, and we shouldn't be addressing our skin color in any capacity. And we shouldn't be going over our, superiors for our own agenda either. So I want to be represented just as much as any minority group in this town. We all pay our taxes, we all want to live peaceably, and I think the people in this town are very good to minorities after witnessing the BLM marches through this town and these people spitting in our officers' faces. It was disgusting, and nobody did anything about it. So I think she needs to go. She doesn't represent us. You guys do, and you need to do your job and let her move on. No ill will, but she's not suited for the job. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Okay, Catherine Summers. Oh, and we have another card. Okay, that's my last call on cards. Okay, Catherine?
Good evening, Council. I was wondering, I don't know, I flip-flopped on exactly what I'm going to say. So the first thing I'm going to say is, damn, how did we get here to talk about this? And as I was getting more discouraged, as I was listening to people who were speaking before me, somewhere I started finding some encouragement in all this. Because we've talked for a long time in this town about having critical, constructive conversations. And I think what I really want to impart is that, or say, and encourage and hope for, is that we make a commitment to each other, all of us here that have differing opinions on how tonight should go, but that we really, I mean, there's some real issues here that we have to sit down and talk about. And we never really brought it forth like this. And so maybe this is good that we're all here. I've spent the last 7 years actually as the executive director here at the Chamber of Commerce, and I've really thought I've done a fairly decent job of listening to others and hearing all points of view, and to building a community where we have some unity and we can we can compromise and find equal playing field and a place where we all find happiness and joy and all of that. And tonight I see I don't see a lot of that, but I think that maybe since we're breaking down some of these walls that we can actually get there. And I would invite you to somehow vote this evening that in a way that will lend itself to maybe some of those conversations. And I invite everybody that's sitting behind me that maybe they'll participate as well. And we have to, again, it's a little bit of compromise. So I think that's all I have to say. But thank you for everybody for being here and bringing your full selves to the table and for sharing your opinions.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joe Rogers. Yep.
Thank you. Joanna and I have been residents of Los Gatos since 1974, so I feel we really know the town, and we've been involved in a number of organizations, whether it's been through the schools or the town council. I just want to comment. I had an opportunity to read Kylie's letter, and as a white male, I was very, very offended by it. And I thought it was very inappropriate, and I would obviously, would say there would be a struggle to have to take something to the Planning Commission knowing that she's already so biased against a white male. We're really interested in how the town is doing. This is not a racial issue, and I think that what she has done, I mean, she's put added burden on the limited staff we have for the town because the response to her letter and what has come back from the state is going to require a lot of effort and work that was unnecessary. And I don't find anything that she has written, even a follow-up letter, that really apologizes or is in remorse of what she's done to the town. Very divisive. And I think she should, the only appropriate thing is that she is removed and appoint somebody that has some experience and know that. And the fact that she's is youth is a poor excuse for lack of experience. And if this was in industry, which I've been in industry for a long time, she wouldn't make the cut. She doesn't have the background to do the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have one card left, and then I'm closing public comment, and then we'll go to recess. And our last speaker will be Kylie Clark.
Good evening. I want to start by saying that this truly is a learning opportunity for me, and I wish that I had worded things differently. I want to be clear, though, that in writing that email, I only had the best interest of the town at heart. Before I begin the rest of my comment, I want to quickly set a few facts straight. I disclosed that I was a planning commissioner, as I've been trained to do, and stated I was writing as a private individual. This was an email, not a public letter, and it was taken extremely out of context when published alongside the official public comments of several organizations. I never once asked HCD to stop the referendum or spoke ill of the people who signed it. I emailed HCD out of concern for our town. From what I heard, they weren't aware of the referendum, and I felt that it was my civic duty as an engaged and concerned citizen to notify them. Now, because I did what I really believed to be right and I made a mistake along the way, I am facing one of the harshest forms of punishment available to the town without being spoken to once throughout this entire process. I submitted a public comment prior to this that is included in the desk item, so thank you for reviewing that since I'm only allowed the same 3 minutes as anyone else tonight. But yeah, please take that into consideration as the town has violated its own code of conduct while working to enforce it. The town has not censured anyone in more than a decade, nor has pretty much any city in our area. I'm a real person, not somebody to be made an example of, and this has a very real impact on me, my life, and my future. In the past, council members, commissioners, and committee members have made comments that many have found to be more offensive than mine during public meetings, not as private individuals. In response, they received private counsel. Because of a mistake in my choice of language in an email in which I clearly stated I was not speaking as a commissioner, I'm being censured. If you're going to vote in favor of this censure, I just ask that you explain why my comment is a major violation of the code of conduct and why it's so much worse than past violations. The impact of your decision tonight is not just about me. It sends a message to every committee member and commissioner. I encourage you to think very carefully about what you want this message to be. This censure sets a low bar for punishment and has a massive chilling effect as people may be hesitant to engage for fear of retaliation. I understand that there is concern that I will demonstrate bias when someone comes before the commission with an application. If you look at my voting history, you'll find no bias whatsoever. We all see the world through different lenses, and as a young woman, I have opinions about the power structures in place. We cannot punish commissioners and committee members for holding opinions as private citizens, because we all do, so long as we leave the bias at the door. I love serving on the Planning Commission, and I'm incredibly grateful that you're allowing me to continue my service. I look forward to receiving my packet every other Friday, and I'm always considerate, thorough, and fair to those coming before us. I promise you that I have learned my lesson, and I do think that we've all learned from this. I should have been more considerate, and I should have used more deliberate wording. I know this, and I'm eager to learn and grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Badami.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Clark. I read your letter today that we received at about 3 o'clock claiming unfair treatment. There's no mention of an apology, but criticism that the evaluation committee is setting a very low bar. And I did hear from Mr. Van Natter earlier that there was no apology to the authors of the referendum. So I suspect that there's no apology that will be forthcoming. I also question, you were questioning actually my participation as vice mayor being part of the committee. And why is that an issue for you? Do you think that the recommendation of censure would be different without my presence as part of that committee?
I don't know whether it would be different, but I was just questioning why the rules stated that it would be the town attorney, the town manager, and either the mayor or vice mayor, and it was both. So it wasn't whether it was you versus not being you, it was that it was both the mayor and vice mayor instead of just one. But I've also had it explained to me since then, and I think it makes perfect sense, and that's a fair balance, someone who voted for me and someone who didn't, to put me on the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you, and thank you for appearing here today. I have not had time to read your letter yet. I will, but I had a question about the original letter, and it's in the context of conflict of interest. You state that as someone who does housing work in a lot of anti-housing cities, I really appreciate the work you are doing to resolve our state's housing crisis. So could you expand on the work that you're doing on behalf of housing in different cities? And is Los Gatos one of the cities that you are working in to do housing work?
Okay. I would say that I mean a lot of things by that, but the main thing is that I'm very deeply ingrained in the world of housing as a whole. So I'm very knowledgeable about the topic. I attend housing element meetings for a bunch of different cities, and it comes up a lot because it's the #1 issue that people seem to be talking about right now.
So if I may follow up, are you compensated financially for the work that you're doing? You use the word work, and you can have a lot of different meanings. Are you compensated financially for work that you're doing on housing elsewhere or in Los Gatos?
I wasn't referring to my work as in my job. I was referring to doing work in the world of housing. So, yeah.
So you're not compensated financially for work that you do in housing, is that correct?
I'm compensated for work that I do at West Valley Community Services, but it was found not to be a conflict of interest.
So if I may explore a little further, are you doing work at West Valley Community Services for which you're paid in the area of housing?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I had another question, if I may. In your letter, you express, and I couldn't tell the tone of this, you say the anti-housing group is claiming that the town will build 12,000 new units in the next 8 years, and then parens, haha, I wish. Is that your position, that you wish that 12,000 new units be built in the next 8 years?
No, it's not, and I was being sarcastic because of how incredibly unrealistic I find that to be, and really I think what that is just evidence of the degree to which I did not want to present myself professionally in this way. To me, it really was an email, and this is not how I outwardly want to present myself as a planning commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one question that I wanted to clarify. I did receive an apology from you. I believe you sent a letter of apology to the committee. Vice Mayor Badami?
I received that apology, but it was for the time that it took away from our regular lives to have to address this issue. It wasn't for the,
Okay.
Yes, I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify that.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you for being here tonight.
I will take a moment to apologize right now. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I really didn't want to personally attack anyone or to come across as racist. I do just have opinions about the power structures that exist, and I see the way that the people that are in power right now, and to me this was an example of that being continued, and I should not have mentioned the demographic information like that, and I've learned that now, and I've learned how to communicate more constructively, but I really do apologize for anyone that I hurt during this.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any questions from Councilmember Rennie or anyone. Okay, thank you. So with that, I will close the public comment, and then at Councilmember Hude's request, we'll take 10?
I need 10, please.
Is 15 better?
Better.
Okay, we'll take a 15-minute break. So I have 7:58, so we'll resume at 8:15, and then the council will deliberate. Public comment is closed. Okay, thank you. To sit down and give KCAT a heads up that we're going to resume in about 15 seconds. Okay, we have Councilmember Rennie back, and are we ready? Okay, so we're resuming from our break, and before we start with council deliberations, what I would like our staff to do is respond to some of the issues that came up, in aggregate. So I think our town manager and our town attorney have some comments to make. Thank you.
Yes, I have some comments on three major questions that came up during the public comment period. The first was a question as to whether the town had properly adhered to the town council code of conduct policy. And the policy provides that minor violations are handled by the evaluation committee internally. For major violations, the council policy does provide that the town is to hire special counsel to interview the party against whom the complaints were made. In this instance, because we were using the town council code of conduct as a model for how to handle the complaints against the commissioner, I did not recommend that we hire special counsel to interview the planning commissioner. And that was based on the fact that the complaints were made about the commissioner's letter. And the letter spoke for itself. It wasn't an instance of he said versus she said. There weren't really facts to be determined. It was, did the letter itself violate the code of conduct or not? And then the next question that was raised was conflict of interest. And so the question is whether the commissioner's position as a planning commissioner enables her to affect a source of income to her. And so the source of income is West Valley Community Services, and they provide services to the unhoused. And I could not foresee an instance in which her position as a planning commissioner would affect West Valley Community Services. And so that was the basis for my recommendation. And then the third question was whether the letter to HCD had affected the town's ability to, had created more work in having the housing element certified. And the State Department of Housing and Community Development was previously made aware by staff of the referendum. And so there was no new information in the letter from the commissioner. The department was already aware that there was a referendum. And the response letter that the town received from the State Department of Housing and Community Development raised issues that are similar to the issues that have been raised in other communities, and they were what staff had anticipated based on its conversations with housing and community development. So this is conjecture, but I don't believe that the letter to HCD affected HCD's processing of the town's housing element.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for our town attorney or our manager? Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. I sort of asked the question informally, but was there any other correspondence either by the town or by Ms. Clark or residents concerning this matter that were not included in the packet or the desk item?
I would say when this issue first came up, Commissioner Clark emailed me to say that it was not her intent to have the email be part of the public record. It was intended as an informal email to HCD. So there's that communication. And then there was the communication that was in the desk item today, this afternoon.
If I may follow up on that.
Sure.
Was there a letter that was sent to Ms. Clark by the town?
Oh, yes. The preliminary decision of the evaluation committee was delivered to Ms. Clark.
And also, was there a letter from Ms. Clark to the evaluation committee that I've sort of heard reference to tonight? Was that included in the packet?
No, it was not.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see, Councilmember Rennie, I'll keep my eye on your picture, so just raise your hand wildly if you need to get my attention. Any other, the public hearing is closed. I'm sorry, this is a standard council procedure. Thank you. Thank you. We will be hearing nothing from the public. You can remain here quietly. Thank you. Councilmember Hudes.
So I wanted to follow up on the answer that was provided before, maybe try to get it in a concise. What is your assessment of the impact of the letter that was sent to HCD?
In my opinion, there was no impact.
And is it possible that we may learn an impact when HCD finally certifies or decides not to certify the housing element?
It's conceivable.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just add that when we received the letter from HCD dated on or about January 12th, it referenced all of the communications that it had received, among them the letter from Ms. Clark. So if it was going to have influence, it would have already occurred.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Badami.
I just need to clarify on the letter that was sent to Ms. Clark. Was that a preliminary decision, or was it an official statement from the town council or office of the town council?
It was the recommendation of the evaluation committee, and after the letter was sent to the commissioner, I reviewed the code of conduct and determined that a public hearing before the town council was required.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question in terms of, I just wanted to clarify, it is quite typical, we train all of our commissioners, and maybe we need to refine the language, when they come up and speak to the council or write letters, that they are required to identify if they sit on a commission and whether they're speaking on behalf of the commission or on behalf of themselves. So I always feel like it's a slippery slope when people try to infer intent. But seeing that the letter stated she was a planning commissioner but speaking as herself, I would think that that's what we ask our commissioners to do. Is that true? Is that part of our training for our commissioners?
Yes, and that's actually the part of the training that I provide. And we just did that training in January, and I made that point quite expressly to our new commissioners.
Thank you. I mean, I'm speaking as someone who sat on a commission before I was on the council since 2014. And, you know, that is something we were always taught to do, because if you don't, if I write a letter to someone or I get up and speak, and then later someone just can Google my name and go, oh, well, she's a council member. Oh, she's on this commission. It sounds like you're not being transparent. So I view the fact that Ms. Clark upfront stated she was on the planning commission, but speaking as herself was transparent, which is what our community is always asking for. I know that there was some discussion going forward of how we use that phrasing. Somebody should say that they're on the commission, but not speaking as a commissioner. What they really should say is they're not speaking on behalf of the commission. One thing I do want to say to our community, there's a lot we learned going through this process, and I think as we work through this, there's a lot that we can do to help our commissioners understand what constructive conversation is, and our community can learn better what constructive conversation is. So I hope that everybody that's in this room right now realizes that all the letters were read, every person was listened to, and that we all treat each other with respect moving forward. So I appreciate that. As I guess I'll make some comments. I mean, as I look through this, seeing the letter and as our committee worked through what the complaints were, the only complaint that was found to have legal merit is basically violating the commissioner's code of conduct in terms of constructive conversation, constructive communication. And I do not believe there's a single person in this room or listening that has ever, never ever said something that they wish they had said differently, could have said better. I think that there should always be an opportunity for someone to make a mistake and learn from it. And I think that, not knowing the purpose, I don't want to assume I know why Ms. Clark wrote that letter. And I think anybody who's putting thoughts out there as to what she was intending, knowing the preparation she makes to be on the Planning Commission, seeing that she is not an outlier commissioner, seeing that she is always prepared, treats everyone with respect, and moves forward, I think the accusations of bias going forward are not merited. And I think the only thing we're looking at is, did she make a poor choice of words in this communication, and how do we move forward to learn from that and use it as an opportunity to work with all of our commissioners for constructive communication, and hopefully with our community for constructive communication. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, I appreciate I wanted to make a comment about that specifically, that I did see additional reasons for action beyond the constructive comment portion. In reading policy, in reading the Commissioner Handbook, I believe it states that once the council has established its position, the commission or their individual members should not do anything contrary to established policies and programs adopted by the town council. And I believe that the council actions that were taken were the submission of the housing element and also the rescinding of elements of the general plan per the signatures on the referendum. The other concern that I had was regarding the sending the letter, and I believe, let me see if I can find the exact language on that. I'm going to have to paraphrase it, but I believe that it states that a commission should not send a letter to an outside agency without having it reviewed by the council. And although Ms. Clark in her letter said she was speaking as an individual, she did not indicate whether she was speaking on behalf of the commission or not. And so that one was a little unclear. But the next sentence then states that an individual commissioner should, if they wish to communicate with the public, should have the commission on which they serve review that item before doing so. And I don't believe that process was followed either. So to me, there are some things beyond the concern about bias and the concern about constructive language that were not consistent with what is in the handbook.
If I can ask you a quick question, you're saying that a commissioner can never express an opinion as an individual, or if they're speaking on behalf of the commission, they have to have their permission?
Let me find the language and I'll read it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want a moment? Should I go to council member?
Go ahead.
Okay, Vice Mayor Badami.
Thank you. I found the letter to be seriously damaging and contrary to town standards. I did not find it to be a mistake, but written with prejudice and intent. There was no apology until about 30 minutes ago when threatened with censure. And I find that there is a myriad of complex issues that exist, and it is beyond just constructive communication. This town prides itself on inclusivity, passing Resolution 2017-024, reaffirming the town's commitment to a diverse, supportive, and inclusive community. The 2040 General Plan also contains a racial, social, and environmental justice element. Section 2.1 states, all members of the Los Gatos community, regardless of age and socioeconomic status, feel valued, respected, and included. Referring to one's race and socioeconomic status in the course of disrespecting a diverse viewpoint is contrary to what we stand for. Ms. Clark, as identifying herself as the planning commissioner and concerned citizen for our town, she may have been transparent in that, but she undercut the planning commission, the town council, and the town attorney. She sought support from the HCD, from rich, white residents deemed to be anti-housing. From our town, meaning town officials making decisions that might cause serious problems with the housing element. Public trust works both ways. As a planning commissioner, she's in a position of public trust for the town, whereas the public believes the town will act in a way that serves and protects the public's interests. She acted, in her own words, with the best interests of the town at heart. We, the town council, carry responsibility to evaluate and discipline town officials for misconduct. The mayor, vice mayor, town attorney, and town manager are now being accused of being unfair and not following procedure. I would be remiss not to mention Oakland Police Chief LaRonnie Armstrong facing discipline, if not dismissal, for failing to discipline officers for misconduct. We have a responsibility here as council, and none of us like being in this position. It's ugly. It's ugly for all of us. Those are my preliminary comments for now, and I look to Councilmember Hudes, who has his hand up.
Councilmember Hudes.
I just wanted to read from the handbook. It says, letters from commissions addressed to the public or other agencies and concerning official positions being taken must first be forwarded to the council for approval before being mailed. Letters from individual commission members to either the public or the media regarding issues that are within the jurisdiction of that commission should be distributed to the other members and the council as a matter of courtesy. So, you know, that's the issue that I felt was beyond the item of constructive voice.
If I can direct to the town attorney, I mean, it sounds to me, I mean, the housing element is an issue for the entire town. There's nobody who's not talking about that. So does it, I would like your opinion. I can't believe that any citizen or any commissioner can't talk about the housing element.
I interpret that sentence to be saying that you are free to talk about matters relevant to the jurisdiction, but as a courtesy, you're encouraged to share that communication with your commission and the council if it's on a matter that's within your commission's jurisdiction.
Okay, so in that case, I mean, that didn't come up in our committee. Would that be a violation?
Because of the word should, I think it's aspirational. I don't think not doing it constitutes a violation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Rennie.
Just a few comments on my thoughts. You know, listening to all the letters and all the public comment, there are some people that are fighting the housing battle, pro or con, who have argued, are trying to take advantage of this situation to further the battle on housing. I don't find any of those type of comments relevant in this, because she did identify herself as she was trained to do, as that she was speaking as an individual, even though she had another role. We've gone over this and we've heard this from the town attorney and so forth. So all of those arguments in my mind are superfluous to the real issue here. Was the use of language that was non-constructive and, frankly, takes us into this identity politics arguments again, which have nothing to do with, the main subject of the letter, which was their thoughts on the housing and maybe making somebody aware that there was a referendum. So to me, that's really what the key issue is getting down to, it's not constructive language. And, I looked through what the committee, the reviewing committee, which was the mayor and the vice mayor and the town manager and the town attorney. I think they got it exactly correct. I can't, come up with an argument. I mean, there was some argument that, well, she didn't mean it and it was her first time, but it actually did. And like I said, I was listening to who was talking, and there are some people that were talking from the angle of, I want to get rid of this person because she's too pro housing. But there were other people that I felt truly were hurt by that language. And to me, that's important. So I think that the committee got it correct in what they decided to do, or recommend, shall I say.
Thank you. I will say, as we were considering all of the issues, censure does seem very harsh, and it was hard for me to come to that conclusion. I do feel that the choice of words, I don't think we should be describing any part of our population by their demographic, by their age, by their race. And as we are embarking on our DEI work, I think we're going to be having a lot of hard conversations, and people need to be ready to be honest, to be open, to give each other some grace, and to look toward how we can use these type of conversations and these learning opportunities to bring our community together, not to create further divide. So I know that Ms. Clark has apologized to us tonight. I know that, part of an additional part of the censure recommended, and that goes with it, is also coaching and mentoring. And I think that we all need to be considerate of other people's feelings and backgrounds when we talk to and about them. And so, I know that we have work to do. I would also want to have additional work done with all of our commissions to go through, this is an opportunity to go through our codes of conduct, a reminder, and look at it. As much as I feel like our recommendation of censure was hard, I do stand by it. And I have full faith that Commissioner Clark will use this opportunity to reflect on her choice of words and what she said. I also have full faith that this community will be able to understand that people make mistakes and have an opportunity to make amends. And, let's not try to be offended. So I just think that we need to work through this and know that we are deeming this a violation and that we have an opportunity then move on. So that's where I am right now. Councilmember Hughes.
Yeah, I had some comments in a little bit different area that I wanted to make before we actually get to voting on a motion. I do not see that tonight's hearing is required. The preamble of the council policy states, these expectations of conduct also apply to all members of town's boards, committees, and commissions in policy 2-04. But we're not talking about expectations of conduct here. We're talking about disciplinary actions. And I think that disciplinary actions are necessarily different for the council than for commissions, because council members may not be removed from office by other council members, only by the public. And so there are other remedies, other disciplines for commissioners. They may be removed from office or barred from future office, but they don't fall into that those three disciplinary actions that are prescribed in 204. And so, that's one concern, because there are other policies regarding commission member disciplinary actions, including policy 211 on page 7 and counseling, which is resolution 100-167. The other concern that I have is that even if 204 does apply, nevertheless, it prescribes investigation by outside counsel. And I don't believe that was obtained. And although the town attorney states that this was not required because Ms. Clark's comments were written, that step is not only to protect the town, but also the subject of the investigation. And perhaps there are other facts that could have been uncovered, such as exploring the potential conflict of interest with West Valley Community Services that was then raised during the question that I had of Ms. Clark. The other concern that I have about the hearing is that a complete record has not been made available to the public or to certain council members. The letter to Ms. Clark from the evaluation committee and the letter from Ms. Clark, which supposedly contains an apology. So here we are with a process that we're following that I don't think is required. However, I think that since commissioners serve at the will of the council may make all appropriate and legal measures regarding boards and commissions. So for that reason, I would not be able to support a motion to remove from office because I think there are flaws in the process that was followed. However, I think within the purview of the council, where the procedure is not prescribed by resolution, that censure is appropriate in the light of the lack of assertion that this will not happen again in tenure as planning commissioner. And the censure, I think, would be effective so that Ms. Clark can reflect on the concerns about bias and to weigh the importance of following the policies and the handbook. They exist for a reason. So that's kind of where I am on it because I think there have been some significant flaws in the process.
Thank you. And I just to tag on, I would agree. I think as we worked our way through the process, we had a variety of different policies. And in the Commissioner's Code of Conduct, it then refers back to town council and other things. So, I think following on, we really do want our policy committee to look at this. I hope we never need it again, but I think we should have a more clear, explicit procedure to follow when we have a discipline issue, so we're not sitting there trying to go through all our policies and see where they meet. So thank you for those comments. Vice Mayor Badami.
I will add my further concerns, and that is a censure will not circumvent the likelihood of future land use appeals based on stated racial and socioeconomic bias. And that's a concern that we all should be aware of. We might have our workload even greater than what we think now, or even with what we're doing to go through this process. The other concern I have is that based on correspondence that we received this afternoon, the working relationship between Ms. Clark and town authorities is now compromised. I'm going to hope for some constructive communication that might cure that. But if one were to read the letter and the allegations, I do have concerns.
I will state that, you know, when I think about commissioners, you wouldn't be on a commission if you didn't feel passionately. And I think, you know, all of our commissioners care very much about the issues that are relative to their commissions. When advisory motions come forward, when commissioners work together, there's not always unanimous consent. There's not always a feeling that the way they want to see things done happen. I know this from being on other commissions, but the decision is made and you move forward. I think similarly, if I were in Ms. Clark's position and I felt that perhaps either the procedure was opaque or I didn't feel like it was followed correctly, I think she's absolutely within her right to question it. And I would not say because she questioned it that she's damaged relationships with the town staff. I have seen nothing but respect and care in her communications, even throughout this process. What we got was constantly respectful emails. So I think we all see things differently, and that's part of the reason why we represent all parts of the town. Do I have a motion, or is anybody ready to move forward since we've all spoken? Well, then I'll go forward. With kind of a heavy heart that we're even here and that we're having this public hearing, I move that the council accept the recommendation by the committee comprised of the mayor, the vice mayor, the town manager, and the town attorney, unanimously recommending censure and coaching / mentoring for Commissioner Clark. Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion and we have no second. Councilmember Hudes.
I'll second the motion, but I would add that there's serious work that needs to be done on the part of the town to clarify the code of conduct for commissioners. I think it's severely lacking, and it fell back onto a sort of a judgment call because the code of conduct for commissioners was lumped in with council members. That's a primary area of concern, and I also think that we need to look very closely at why outside counsel was not employed in this case, because I think that outside counsel does serve to protect rights of all involved, and I think it's a wise step to do that. So I am seconding, but I'm reluctant with my decision on censure, but of all the options, I think it's the one that's most appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And I know that's not part of the amendment or part of the motion, but I agree with your comments. And I think we know that we have work to do going forward to clarify this process and bring it back to the council for approval. So I appreciate that, and I share your frustration. So we have a motion and a second. Any comments, any further comments from council members? If not, I'll call the question. Oh, I'm sorry. Vice Mayor Badami.
Based on Councilmember Rennie's earlier comments, I suspect that he will be supporting the motion, which means that you'll have a majority and it will pass, regardless of my vote. But my concern remains, and that is a censure will not circumvent the likelihood of future land use appeals. And I mean, I'm going to support the motion, but I'm reluctant on that reason. It's going to pass If I say no, it's not going to make a difference. She won't be removed. But this is a serious offense, and a censure makes it official that the town does not tolerate this type of communication or bias.
Thank you. I will take that into account when I do my coaching. So I will call the question. It'll be a roll call vote because we have Councilmember Rennie across the world and on Zoom. So Councilmember Rennie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Badami.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, so that motion passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you. Do we have any follow-up from staff? Okay, thank you everyone for comporting yourselves respectfully. Meeting is adjourned.